Millennials are America's largest, most educated generation in American history. A generation of ambition, education, and progress facing an uncertain reality. Born into an era of economic chaos, they face challenges far beyond what they were told to prepare for. They've had to rethink traditional milestones as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes beyond the numbers to capture the unique ways this generation is reshaping their future, in their own words. It's a story of real people, authentic challenges, and untold resilience. Explore the stories and reflections of America's Lost Generation by Cameron Cohen. Available now at soupllc.com.
Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined by Andy Semotiuk. He is with myworkvisa.com, all things to do with immigration, helping clients improve their lives through immigration. He is lovely in Canada. He's a U.S. Canadian immigration lawyer, and considering how our politics are going, Canada's about to get a whole bunch of new neighbors, which is very unfortunate because we're in the middle of a housing crisis. But then again, so are we. So welcome, Andy, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
I'm very happy to be with you, and I'm excited to talk about this subject with you. I know there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so why don't we start from the very beginning? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your history in immigration law?
Sure. Immigration is one theme that has been pretty dominant in my life right from the beginning. While I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, my folks were from Ukraine. They immigrated to Canada. And so I got a taste of, immigrant life and settling in Canada, etc. What's more, my mother's sister, Helen, immigrated from Ukraine to the United States, and she settled in Los Angeles. And over time, I became someone who was shuttled back and forth between Edmonton and Los Angeles. And so I got a taste of both countries and the immigrant experience myself. So, for example, I went to high school in Los Angeles. And later in life, as you'll find out probably in the course of our conversation, I practiced law 10 years in Los Angeles, 5 years in New York. So I have a kind of a cross-border kind of a life between Canada and the United States. That's a little background about me.
Fascinating. So no, what was it like to like you went to American law school, I guess, and then later went to Canadian law school?
No, what happened was I went to UBC in Vancouver.
Okay.
Law school there. I practiced and became a member of the bar in Ontario first. Then I moved to the United States, and I was a journalist for 3 years at the United Nations. And while I was a journalist, I decided, well, I might as well write the New York State bar exam. And I did. And luckily for me, I passed. And I began my career in the United States as a lawyer then. In the meantime, I moved back to Canada. For a while, I was in Edmonton, practicing law in Edmonton. And thereafter, I moved to Los Angeles, where I wrote the California State Bar exam. So I'm a wandering kind of guy. I've been.
Yeah, most people don't want to take the bar once, much less 3 times. So
that's true.
So then, yeah.
You might say I'm almost an expert at taking bar exams.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, that is 110% true. So then I guess how did your career end up in immigration law and helping people, in the US Canadian border situation?
Okay. So a key moment in my life was when I was being called to the New York bar. And I was visiting Canada for a while at that time, crossing the border in Toronto at the Pearson Airport. And while I was crossing, the U.S. immigration officer noticed, that I had, I said, where are you headed? New York. What are you going to do? I'm going to be called to the bar of the state of New York. And he didn't like it felt kind of strange to him. So he said, can I see what's in your wallet? I said, oh, well, if you have to, okay. So I showed my wallet, and I had a New York driver's license in there. And he looked at the driver's license, and it was a driver's license that included passenger capability. So when I got my driver's license in New York while I was studying for the bar, they said, hey, you want the regular license or you want the premium one? It costs you an extra $5 or whatever. So give me the premium one. So he thought, well, this guy's probably driving taxis in New York or something like that for a living. And he kept looking, and I had a green card in my wallet. He says, what's this? It's a green card. What's it doing in your wallet? Well, I wanted to check to see if I still am able to work and live in the United States on this green card. And that caused a whole kerfuffle, which resulted in him denying me entry, and I had to work through the consulates to really prove that I indeed am being called to the bar, and I need to get down there because I'm being called, and I was called to the bar. But the experience led me to think, this is an area where I could do a lot of good for people. I could help a lot of people. And because my family was, immigrants, and I knew their experience and their hardships, I thought, this is a good area for me to work in. And that's how the journey started.
Fascinating. So, I guess then we should really discuss kind of like what, how does this work? What do you do? How can you help people?
Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit. There are 5 ways to immigrate to the United States or to Canada, generally speaking. The 5 ways are: number 1, marry your way in, or have family member that can sponsor you. A lot of people, there's cross-border marriages. They fall in love, and one guy's in the United States, the other partner's in Canada, so they need to arrange immigration to move. Second way in is to invest your way in. Let's say you've got a lot of money. You can invest in projects, and by investing in projects, the countries have programs that enable people to get what's called a green card in the United States or a maple leaf card in Canada, and ultimately, over time, a path to citizenship. A third way is to study your way in. You can go to college or school and then college. And for example, in the US scenario, you can get an F1 visa as a student and study, and thereafter make your way through the system. You get, after graduation, what's called a OPT 1-year work permit, where you can go to work, and then you go to H-1B work visa, usually, and ultimately a green card. Another way you can get in is claim refugee status. So, for example, if you're being persecuted because of your race, religion, ethnic background, political opinion, or whatever from the country where you're from, you can claim refugee status or asylum in the country you're arriving in. So, for example, in the United States, it's asylum, and in Canada, it's a refugee status. And over time, if you can prove that you have a well-founded fear of persecution, if you will be deported back to your country of origin, you'll be able to stay in the United States. And then finally, let's see, we've covered marrying your way in, studying your way in, investing your way in, asylum, and the final one is working your way in. There are categories where you can get a work permit that will enable you first to work and ultimately to qualify for permanent residence, either in the United States or Canada. So those are that's the broad highlight of what I do for a living, is I help people change their lives for the better. My little motto is helping clients improve their lives through immigration.
I want to. No, I've had. I apologize for finishing your question with the cough. I've had a lot of recordings this week, and it's Wednesday, and my voice is
No
tired,
problem.
and I have
Listen,
another podcast this
I love it.
afternoon.
I love it. No
I'll cut
problem.
it out in post. Don't worry. I want to return to the tribunal panel on the Canadian Human Rights Commission, but
I,
first, kind of top of the show, as I'm sure you're aware, our politics have gone to the left down here.
yes.
And a lot of people joke, half joke, some a little bit more serious these days about escaping to Canada to escape what Trump is doing here in the United States. That process is probably a lot harder than people understand. But if you are a disaffected American who feels like you're going to be under the gun of what they're planning with data and snatching people off the street and all this type of thing, what would be the best way? How would one do that?
Okay.
Asking for a friend, but also possibly maybe for me because I'm diagnosed autistic and they want to round us up and put us in a camp somewhere. So I may have to motor over to I live in New England. I have to motor over to Niagara Falls and
Okay. All right.
claim that refugee status. So if someone wants to kind of GTFO America,
Yeah.
what's the best way to do that?
Okay. Let's talk about that topic. That's a serious topic, and a lot of people are interested in that, and particularly because, I mean, there are roving bands of ICE people arresting people, and I'm getting calls almost daily from people who are scared and, perfectly legitimately in the US, but are about to be deported, etc. So we
Yeah,
need to be clear. Is Canada an option for people who are illegally in the United States? Is one question. And then,
right.
is Canada an option for people who perhaps politically or otherwise, socially or whatever, such as health issues or whatever, want to leave because they're not being treated properly in Canada? Those are two questions. You raised that question. So let's go with the
Or
second.
just fear of being rounded up to one of his wellness camps.
Okay. If you are afraid, you're an American, let's say we're going to deal with legitimate Americans first. That is to say, citizens, permanent residents, people on work permits, and protected, temporary protected status or whatever first.
Perfect.
Such a person could come to Canada and at the border claim refugee status. Now, if you're an American, you can say, I have a well-founded fear of persecution based on my race, religion, political opinion, national background, and there are other social, there's the issue of sexual orientation and so on. These are legitimate grounds. If you have a well-founded fear that you can show, then you can claim refugee status and you will be allowed to make your claim from the United States in Canada. However, if you are not a citizen of the United States, but are from somewhere else, then you need to show that you have a family member in Canada to be able to make such a claim. Otherwise, you won't be able to. You'll be turned away because of this safe third country agreement between Canada and the United States, which says each one of the countries is safe for refugees and therefore they don't need to escape somewhere else. That's a short answer for refugee issues. Now, for people who are in the United States and not in lawful status because they overstayed or they came illegally through the border, they came across the Rio Grande or they came as a DACA kid with their family members, their parents who brought them in, whatever the reason, but they do not have lawful status in the United States and they want to come to Canada. They could come, but the ways of coming are very few and hard to access. I've already mentioned about a refugee claim. If they have a family member in Canada, no problem. They can come in and claim refugee status if they have a well-founded fear of persecution. If they don't have a family member, refugee status is out. And since they are in the United States unlawfully at the moment, all temporary roads to Canada are closed for them, such as visitor status, study permit, work permit type approaches, because Canada will say, well, these are temporary, and we have no guarantee you'll go back home because you're coming from America. It's obvious you don't want to stay in America. And, you're in America because you're escaping from wherever you came. So the likelihood of you leaving at the end of your period of authorized stay, if we let you in, is very limited. And therefore, for that reason, your chances of success are very limited. There's humanitarian and compassionate matters that could be considered, but by and large, humanitarian and compassionate considerations are not dealt with at the border. They are not a key to entry to Canada. So the ways to come to Canada for unlawfully present people in the United States are reduced down to permanent residence applications. In some way, they have to show that they can qualify for one of the streams that enables them to come permanently to Canada. Such streams might include, for example, the Federal Skilled Worker Express Entry stream, the federal skilled trade stream. There are some provincial programs, skilled worker programs that one could qualify for, especially, for example, for French speakers. Canada is very interested in upping the number of French speakers. There are family-based applications. So let's say you got a wife in Canada and you're from the United States. Your wife sponsors you. That's a capable way of coming. That's a way of coming in. In short, you're going to need the advice of a lawyer, and I'm not trying to promote myself here. Any good immigration lawyer in Canada can help people like that. And that's the way you would have to sort out what is your road to Canada.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. I am I'm wondering if the Canadian system is ready for a potential influx of citizens they did not plan on taking back, given one of the ideas the Trump administration is floating, and I pay attention to it because I have a friend whose his family came here in the 70s for medical treatment, and he's a green card permanent resident, never got citizenship, all this type of thing. She was born here. She is a citizen, but might not be for much longer because we're getting rid of birthright citizenship. Is Canada prepared for, like, my friend Brady's a bridal seamstress? That's useful. Is Canada prepared? Like, what if they get rid of birthright citizenship and people like her are no longer citizens? Is Canada at all prepared for like 500,000 of new neighbors that they had no clue they were ever going to have? Like, what's that look like? What's the conversation happening up there? I mean, it's insane.
Cameron, that's a great question, a super astute question to ask. I've written some articles on that. I think I may not have mentioned yet, but I write for Forbes, and I've written some articles on that theme. Here's the challenge. For Canada to have 500,000 people come across the border because they're escaping the United States would be a disaster. The whole country would probably implode because on average, for example, refugees on average per year, Canada accepts about 50,000. That's the maximum national average. And the total projected number of people who Canada is going to be allowing to come to Canada this year is around 350,000. So a number like 500,000 would be just an impossible number for Canada to deal with.
Yeah.
But critics of my views on this subject have pointed out to me that it's not very likely that we're going to have a huge flood of people coming. They argue that, most people will try and ride it out in the United States or possibly go home to wherever they came from. But there's not every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the United States is going to say, "Oh, I'm just going to go to Canada across the border."
No, I mean that's not. I mean that's definitely not. I think the most majority opinion. I wonder how many kids of Canadian parents that without birthright citizenship won't be citizens anymore, according to the
Yeah.
Trump administration. And the reality with what they're building with ICE, they will collect them and dump them on your doorstep.
That's true, and
Like,
I'm with you on this, Cameron. I'm with you on this. My thought is that we really in Canada need to prepare for an influx of a lot of people from the United States.
like my friend Brady might be
Legal and
rounded up and
illegal.
brought to you. Like I said, she's a bridal seamstress. Send her to the nearest sewing shop. That's
But the birthright thing is red herring. I don't think that now people are behaving like crazy down there. Citizens are being arrested. So,
Yeah.
in that context, it's conceivable a lot of people could be kicked out. But generally, I don't think the Supreme Court is about ready to, overrule the 14th Amendment. And
No, I said the same thing on the Cameron Joel News Hour because they had ruled on another part of the case and had not ruled on birthright citizenship.
Right.
And I said, and I'm kind of like, I would love to read the argument from John Roberts as to how the 14th Amendment just suddenly today on the 9th of July, 2025 has ceased to matter. It's been there since 1860 something. It was it was a Reconstruction Amendment. It's been there, but all of a sudden today in 2025, no more, sort of thing.
Yeah. That's a good point. Actually, I talked to someone for my article that I wrote on this subject not long ago. And he is a prosecutor, a former prosecutor, heavy-duty prosecutor, and I would say probably a Republican in terms of his background. And he was saying, well, it's not, his view was the same as ours, that the 14th Amendment is not likely going to be overruled. But he thought maybe the Supreme Court wanted to throw a sop over to Trump by ruling on this national injunction matter, the procedural matter that they have ruled on, where they block national injunctions on birthright cases, because there was an injunction in place. One of the federal courts said, hold it, this is a constitutional question. A lot of kids are going to be affected by this. We can't implement this right off the bat. They introduced a national injunction. And that procedural matter, as you pointed out, went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court knocked that one down, saying, oh, no, you can't have a national injunction. You're going to have to approach this differently. And so this guy who I interviewed said, I said, just possibly judicial politics wise, they're trying to figure out a way of dealing with that issue without upsetting Trump too much. So he figured, okay, they'll throw him a sop. You win on the injunction part, but when the real matter comes up before you, you're dead. And that's the way I'm reading it right now.
No, I agree with you. I see it very much the same way. I especially this late in the term, I don't think SCOTUS wanted to take on a big marquee Constitution case. I mean that's reaching Marbury versus Madison, Dred Scott, Brown versus Board of Education level. That's the level of case that this would be. And they're kind of like, it's the summer. I have plans in the south of France. We have no time to decide about the 14th Amendment right now. Well, I have a flight.
Well, I hope that that's the way it's going to be, in terms of how to deal with that part.
Well, and it's great for Canada because you won't be be unnecessarily importing my friend Brady, who suddenly won't be a citizen because their father is not.
But
So
even still, I believe personally that there will be a significant uptick of people coming from America as these, like the billions of dollars that Trump has gotten through this big, beautiful budget of his
right.
available for enforcement. That we haven't seen that on the streets yet, and
No.
he's brought in the military to enforce immigration rules, and he's created camps. He's got camps ready, like that alligator alley campus already for
Yeah.
people. Like, oh my goodness. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of people agitated and thinking, I got to get out of here. I don't want to get arrested.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot. I mean, I think there's kind of, I mean, I think there are those of us, I think there's a couple different groups. There's those of us who are citizens who've lived in this country our whole lives, and both my parents are citizens, so don't come for me.
Yeah.
And I'm Black, so we've been here forever. And but there's those of us who are, edge cases or have a mental health concern, especially like autism, which is being specifically targeted. And we're kind of looking at might be time to go so we don't end up in a camp. I think there are a lot of permanent legal residents who are really concerned because they're arresting people going to green card meetings. And I was really disturbed when I told this to a buddy of mine, and he's like, I don't care. And I'm kind of like, what happened to do the immigration thing the right way? They are doing it the right way and they're getting arrested anyway. He's like, I don't care, sort of thing. There's the people who have a status and are now afraid to go near an immigration building because you could be arrested. I think there's a group of illegal immigrants who can afford to self-deport, and they're probably just going to see themselves out. It's getting too weird. Let's get out of here, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I think the last group, and I think this is the most perilous group, is you have the people who are here illegally. They don't have the money to leave. They don't have the resources to leave. They have nowhere to go. And they're the ones that are going to be rounded up and end up in Alligator Alcatraz in Florida, which is already flooding because it's Florida. Everything floods in Florida. I think there's definitely kind of four distinct groups of either people that are already leaving because they have the means to do so, people who are afraid to go to the immigration office now, and a lot of us. I mean, I never in my life thought that I would hear on 60 Minutes talk to a researcher that they referred to an American researcher working in Canada because the researcher's grant funding had been cut by Trump and they've already left. One of the best people who's researched fascism has already said it feels like Berlin in 35. I'm going. Wow. It's not good. It's not looking good.
For your information, there are several profs from the United States, Yale, I think, who have come up to the U of T. Timothy Snyder is one such professor.
Yeah.
He's one of these experts on fascism and so on.
Yeah.
He's spoken out, been very outspoken about what's happening in the U.S. and how the system seems to be, catering. I mean, it's like there's a cratering is the word, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely
catering,
that.
Not catering, Cameron, but cratering.
Yes. No, I mean, there's all of these, different dynamics happening. And so it's, I think it's a difficult thing. And I imagine given how kind of tense relations are between the US and Canada with this immigration aspect, I think things are only going to get worse as time goes on.
I think Trump keeps saying how he wants Canada to be the 51st state.
Yes.
That's not helping. That's not helping at all.
No.
Canadian backs are up. What is this? What happened to consent, or what do the people want? It's just he wants. So what's going to happen? We're going to just become, as Canadians, the next state in the United States.
I mean, honestly, as a Democrat, if we annex Canada and split your provinces into states and made them our system, we would love that because we would have supermajorities in Congress pretty much forever. So as far as a Democrat, politically speaking, let me
you
send you
want to
some apple
join.
pie and an American flag. Let's put these guys out of power.
You might want to join Canada, break away from the United States and come and join Canada as a
I mean,
country.
so I lived in Washington State for 10 years. I lived in the Seattle area. And the running joke was that we're so far west from the rest of the country, we really should just join Canada. Like,
Yeah.
we're much physically closer to them. We should just leave and join over there. Eastern Washington wants to join Idaho anyway. So our thought was split it at the Cascades. Western Washington will just join Canada, and Idaho can have the rest of it. And we'll do a little
I,
border redraw, and Bob's your uncle.
I get that, especially because my feeling is the northern state people are effectively the same as Canadians, like people from Minnesota and Seattle
Yeah.
and stuff like that. The differences are very small in terms of lifestyle and thinking, in my experience. Just
No, I mean, I lived in Canada doing a writer's residency through the University of Lethbridge in Alberta,
oh,
for a month in the Canadian Rockies, which I do think are more beautiful, but I can't say that very often because I come from Colorado and we're known for our mountains in Colorado, but I do think the Canadian Rockies are more beautiful. I lived there for a month and got on quite famously in a small town of several hundred people. I'm like, I have nothing to complain about. I have an IGA grocery store. The pizza shop basically makes pizza on demand if they're there and open, sort of thing. There's a vape shop down the road because I vape, so that's cool. I really have all my needs met in this small mountain town, like, sort of thing.
Lethbridge is known for that writers group, I think. They
Yeah,
have.
the Goshen Writers Residency.
Yeah,
It is quite,
yeah.
yeah, it is well known. And it was a wonderful privilege to go and do that. And of course, thank you to the University of Lethbridge for inviting me to do that. And I felt so international. Although I did have a problem at the border, they did stop me and they did have I did have to show them all the paperwork from the university, and they were worried I was going to overstay because I had a job or something. I'm like, no, 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 no. This is not that at all. Like,
Yeah.
it's but that was a fun time at the border getting into Canada. And they also wanted to make sure I had enough money for the whole time because I was gonna be there for so long. So I was like, no, no, I'm well funded. So it was fine. Um, but
But
yeah.
we're on the whole I'm just reading some information now. There's a book out. It's an older book, but I've been reading about. You mentioned the Brown versus the Board of Education, Democracy in Chains. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book.
I have heard of that book, yes.
It's a fabulous book, and it goes through the history, with respect to sort of like it's looking at what's happening in America now from the standpoint of the deep, sort of dark money people that, the Koch brothers and people like that. And there's a lady, I think her name was Jane Mayer or something like that from the New Yorker that
Hmm.
wrote a very good book that I think ties into this one. And the big, if you look at the United States, I think one of the biggest problems is the income and wealth divide in the United States.
Oh,
We
it's massive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and somehow to get over that, that's a difficult thing to overcome. Just from the books I've read on that subject, taxation alone may not be the solution. It has to be something. I don't know what you're going to do in terms of adjusting things like that. There's
Yeah, I mean,
there are a lot of issues there that one could
yeah.
touch on.
No, I mean, there's a taxation is part of it. You also have to change the culture around business. We at one time in this country had a culture where businesses genuinely cared about their employees and their employee well-being. And that was something that was kind of really forged out of the labor movement in the 20th century. Not that business
Yeah,
owners were so nice, people died to get that done.
yeah,
But after World War II, you had a very different culture. around taking care of employees and all this sort of thing. The culture had shifted and changed. And so you had this great combination in the middle of the 20th century where you had companies that cared about their employees, and you also had high taxes that kept R&D and spending and wages high. One of the innovations that was made by Jack Welch and Lee Iacocca,
Yeah.
of GE, Ford, and then Chrysler, was what's called shareholder capitalism. And it was the idea that, what you don't need to take care of your employees. That's value left on the table and capital you could be returning to shareholders, rather than making sure that your company is a great place to work that, looks after people for a long time. And that was in the 80s. And ever since then, working conditions have progressively gotten worse. Wealth has assiduously flowed its way to the top. Nobody has pensions anymore. Nobody stays at a company longer than 5 years if they can help it. The culture has entirely changed. The benefit of that, much like in the 19th century, is you end up with a very dynamic economy that produces a lot of money. The downside is that money is concentrated in the hands of very few. And so, yes, I would agree with your assessment. I think honestly, nothing else in this country really can be solved. Name it. Name a social issue, name a infrastructure issue, name an economic issue. Until you solve that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can't really address any of the rest of it. That
Yeah.
really, and I started my career, this version of my career in journalism, writing about capitalism and
Oh,
writing about
really?
the story that happened. Yeah, my very, very first long form essay was called "How We the People Became We the Corporation."
Oh,
Talking about how companies basically bought government and turned it into a line item expense, so nothing ever happens and democracy doesn't work anymore. And then my follow-up was called 1977, The Rise of Discounters and Deregulation, where I talk about how this whole mess was papered over with cheap available credit and inexpensive goods from Asia. And so, yes, until we solve that problem, it's going
yeah.
to be hard to solve a lot of other things in this country. Unfortunately, it is the gnarliest problem to solve.
Well, I see that, we're on the doorstep to a third party. Our friend
Yeah.
there, he's, I don't know if he's a friend or whatever, but he's thinking of setting up a third party. So who knows where that might lead. There's, if it was ideologically sound in some way, um, as opposed to Musk's ego, just simply, um, maybe something could be made of that. But the way it is at the moment, I don't know if it's going to go very far.
Yeah, it's giving Ross Perot 92 vibes, but Perot had better policies. I mean, unfortunately, unlike much of the rest of the world, we have a winner take all first past the post system,
Yeah.
which makes it very hard for third parties to make it, unlike a proportional parliamentary system a la Germany, or even ranked choice voting like Australia. I think people sometimes forget, like, our federal voting system, except for expanding suffrage, has not changed in 249 years, and it shows. And other countries, even other countries whose constitutions we wrote, we did not write their constitutions the same as ours. Like in the case of Germany, we fixed a lot of the flaws of our own system in the German constitution. We're like, you don't want this. Trust us. We live with it. You don't want this. Yeah. And so, it's a difficult thing. But before we go, because we're running up to the top of the hour, and I do have a meeting right after this, I wanted to ask you about the tribunal panel of the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
Right. Okay.
What was
So
all that about?
for
Yeah.
3 years, I was on the tribunal panel. So the Human Rights Commission in Canada is a national body, and it tries to implement human rights decisions, and deal with human rights questions, sort of like the civil rights movement in the United States. An adjudicating body that deals with that subject. And so I was on the panel, that sort of the judges that resolve issues that come up through the Human Rights Commission. And in the course of my 3 years, um, being a judge is certainly different than being a lawyer. And I noticed while I'm sitting there, that as the one side started, I started shaking my head. Yeah, that makes sense. Then you hear the other side, and you start going, yeah, that makes sense. And then you're stuck there trying to make a decision. But it's a tedious process to get anything through the Human Rights Commission. I mean, that's like years of work. So policy-wise, it's good when it comes up with decisions, hopefully generally good. But the problem is who's got the stamina and the money to pay lawyers to work for years to get decisions made, mainly corporations. So, you've got corporations there, or perhaps labor unions. But that's part of the solution, but a lot more goes into having a healthy democratic system than that. Let me just say that I think the big problem is oligarchy, in the United States. Jimmy Carter said, now listen, Canada's not perfect either. Let's face it. I mean,
No. I'm very well aware of many of Canada's issues, and because I do business with a guy who lives in Vancouver, and their housing issues are well known and from Seattle area. So yes.
Yeah. But I was happy to talk with you about these issues, and of course, you could talk for hours about things like this.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to see that you have a program like this one where you can cover some of these bigger topics and deal with them. I think people need to get into the discussion and get mobilized in both Canada and the U.S. We all need to pay more attention, I would say.
Oh, well, if RFK gets serious about rounding up autistic people, I'll give you a call. Need a legal secretary? I still take the transcription and dictation. So it's no, I mean it is, yeah. No, there's the lots of, it's not a, I think a lot of people, I mean, honestly, I think things have gotten to the state in this country where anyone who's looking to go of their own volition is any whatever else somebody else has going on has to be a lot less difficult than this.
Yeah.
If I can live in a country where I don't have to worry about being gathered up and taken away, that's already going to be an upgrade. So whatever you got, we'll figure it out, sort of thing.
Okay. I can live with that.
Yeah, but thank you. I do enjoy having these conversations, and if I really hope that I don't have to make some mad dash to a border and stop having these conversations.
If you need help, let me know. I'll help you.
No, thank you. I definitely appreciate that. I think the part, and then we got to go, but I think the part that frightens me the most is how many people, even friends of mine, are not alarmed. And I've sat with it for a long time to be kind of like, why aren't they alarmed? And I'm kind of like, oh, I know why, because it won't affect them.
Yeah.
And there's so many moments where I'm kind of like, God, this is what it would have been to feel like a Jew in Germany in the 30s. Like to be kind of like, it's like, isn't anyone good? No, because it's not going to affect them. And so for them, it's not a big concern. So they're not going to be moved to action because that's never going to touch them.
Yeah.
It's
a kind of a freeloader mentality. So long as it doesn't touch me, why should I care?
Yeah. Well, and also just watching people talk about, legacy Americans and heritage Americans. And I'm like, that's just a byword for white. Yeah, I'm from the South. I've heard all this stuff before. Like, this is stupid. But anyway, this has been a fascinating conversation. We've kind of been all over the board. It lacks coherence, but that's okay. It's no problem. That's, my listeners are very used to that at this point. But we're coming up to the top of the hour. Why don't you let us know where we can find you online and keep up with you?
Oh, okay. I'm with Pace Law Firm in Toronto, Canada, and pacelawfirm.com is our website. You can reach me through there. Andy Semotiuk is my name.
Yes. And if I have to make a mad dash, not be rounded up, I will be applying for the mailroom there. But, well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Loved it. Thanks again, Cameron.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you.